A stone. Just a stone. Heavy, cold, meaningless. A mere piece of rock. Thousands of them scattered along the riverbank. But the first human who lifted that stone and placed it on top of another wasn't simply building a wall. That person was trying to give the invisible a home. That person was attempting to draw the boundaries of the universe itself. For 10,000 years, humans have carried stones. They raised columns, lifted domes, gilded surfaces. Millions of hours of labor, millions of tons of material, countless lives devoted to this singular pursuit. And here's the strange part. Civilizations that never knew each other, societies separated by vast oceans, people speaking entirely different languages, they all did nearly the same thing. Pyramids in Egypt, ziggurats in Mesopotamia, temples in Greece, stupas in India, torii gates in Japan, pyramid temples in Mesoamerica. All different, but behind all of them lies the same question. Does God live somewhere? If so, what should that place look like? What material should it be made from? Which direction should it face? This isn't a story about architecture. This isn't just a story about architecture. This is the story of humanity's heaviest answer to its oldest and most profound question. In Egypt, for 3,000 years, the same ritual was repeated every morning without fail. Before sunrise, while darkness still clung to the land, while most people still slept, a priest would appear at the temple gate. He had bathed the night before, shaved his head, dressed in linen garments. With an oil lamp in hand, he would enter the dark corridors. From the outside, temples look massive, but inside they're like labyrinths, narrow passages, dim rooms, each step leading deeper into darkness. And finally, a door, sealed, stamped with the pharaoh's mark in clay. The priest would break the seal and open the door. Inside the room stood a statue, gold-plated, carved from stone, sometimes black granite, sometimes with lapis lazuli eyes. This was considered the god's body, Amun, Ra, Osiris, Horus, whichever deity the temple belonged to. And then the ritual would begin. First, the priest would wash the statue's face, with salt water, then with fresh water from the Nile. He would remove the old garments and dress it in new linen clothes. He would apply green and black eye makeup, anoint it with perfume, carefully groom it. Finally, plates of food would be placed before it: bread, beer, roasted meat, fruits. This wasn't merely symbolic. The Egyptians believed the god actually lived in this statue. The statue wasn't just stone, but the god wasn't always there either. Think of the statue like a house. The owner is sometimes home, sometimes not. The ritual was an invitation for the god to come home. And as long as the god stayed, like any living being, it needed to eat, be cleaned, be dressed. The temple is the god's house. This sentence represents the oldest architectural principle in human history, and perhaps the most astonishing one. Consider this. You, a mere human, are building a house for a god. You're offering a roof to the power that created the universe. This isn't courage, nor is it arrogance. This is an attempt to make the invisible visible, an effort to contain the infinite within a single point. Egyptian temple architecture reflects this logic with perfect clarity. Look at the ground plan of any major temple: Karnak, Luxor, Edfu, Dendera. They all share the same progression, from the massive entrance pylon, through open courtyards, into the hypostyle hall with its forest of columns, and finally into the inner sanctuary. Each space is darker, lower ceilinged, more enclosed than the one before. The ceiling height decreases as you move inward. The floor level rises. Light diminishes. Sound dampens. This architectural compression mirrors the theological compression from the expansive world of humans to the concentrated presence of the divine. And there's a temporal dimension too. Egyptian temples weren't built once and done. They grew over centuries. A pharaoh would add a courtyard. His grandson would add a pylon. A dynasty later, another hypostyle hall. Karnak evolved over 2,000 years, layer upon layer, like geological strata of devotion. Each addition was an offering, not just to the god, but to the eternal memory of the builder. But how do you build a house? From what material? In what form? Facing which direction? Which door serves as the entrance? Which room is accessible only to the elite? This is where civilizations began to diverge, but surprisingly, most arrived at the same conclusions. In Mesopotamia, approximately 5,000 years ago, the world's first true cities emerged: Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, Nippur. And in every one of these cities, a single type of structure defined the skyline: the ziggurat. A massive structure rising in steps, each level smaller than the one below, with a small temple at the summit. Sometimes 3 tiers, sometimes 7. The ziggurat of Ur, Etemenenki in Babylon, Eanna in Uruk, Ekor in Nippur, all built with the same logic. The Sumerians called it the stairway to heaven. The Akkadians called it the mountain of the gods. Now picture that geography for a moment. Mesopotamia is a flat plain. Between the Tigris and the Euphrates, alluvial farmland stretching to the horizon. No wrinkles on the skyline, no mountains, no hills, just flat, endless, horizontal world. But people looked up at the sky. The sun, the moon, the stars, all above. The gods must live there. Up was sacred, down was ordinary. So what do? If there's no mountain, you build one. Ziggurats were human-made mountains. Each step brought you closer to the heavens. The steps weren't for humans, they were ramps for the gods, a pathway for the deity to descend from the sky and ascend again. And these structures weren't easy to build. Mesopotamia had no stone. Getting stone required traveling hundreds of kilometers. So ziggurats were built from mud brick, clay dried in the sun. Millions of bricks, shaped by hand, transported, stacked. The core was mud brick, the outer shell fired brick, and between the bricks, bitumen for waterproofing. The ziggurat of Ur is estimated to have used approximately 7 million bricks, each one handmade. The small room at the top was the meeting point. Some texts call it the bridal chamber, a place where the god descended from heaven to spend the night, unite with a priestess, and bring fertility. The sacred marriage ritual, hierogamy, took place here. The king would unite with the priestess on behalf of the god, and this union would bring abundance to the entire land. Does that sound strange? Perhaps, but in that era, sexuality, fertility, and abundance were inseparable concepts. For an agricultural society, the most important thing was harvest, and harvest required rain, and rain required divine favor. Priests climbed to this room every night to observe the stars. They recorded planetary movements, predicted eclipses in advance. This was a place of worship, an observatory, and the mathematical center of the state. To sit atop the ziggurat was to sit at the center of the universe. The city plan revolved around the ziggurat. The god's house stood at the center of everything. And from that center, the world made sense. The 4 directions emerged, calendars were established, planting times were calculated. The temple wasn't just a place of worship, it served as library, school, bank, courthouse, and hospital. Grain storage was connected to the temple, debt records were kept here. Religion and state, economy and theology, heaven and earth all united in that structure. Perhaps the first bureaucracy was born here. The invention of writing was likely connected to temple records. How much grain came in, how much went out, who owed what, who was owed. Have you heard of the Tower of Babel? That story in the Torah was probably inspired by Atemenaki, a 7-tiered ziggurat with a summit touching the sky, covered in blue glazed bricks, estimated at approximately 90 meters tall, one of the highest structures of the ancient world.
When Herodotus saw it, he wrote in amazement, "Towers upon towers, then another, then another." According to the story, humans tried to reach heaven. God punished them, confused their languages. But from another perspective, that massive structure really existed, really reached toward the sky. And those who saw it, foreign travelers, exiled peoples, felt both awe and fear before this colossal work. Perhaps the legend was the mythological expression of that striking experience. The Egyptians chose an entirely different path. They too wanted to ascend to the heavens, but it wasn't the living who would ascend, but a dead king. From the outside, a pyramid looks like a tomb, and it is a tomb. Inside, there's a sarcophagus, a mummified body, items needed for the afterlife. But for the Egyptians, the pyramid was far more than this. It was the ramp by which the pharaoh ascended to heaven. Consider the Great Pyramid of Khufu. On the Giza Plateau in the middle of the desert, approximately 146 meters tall. When first built, its outer surface was covered in white limestone, bright, smooth, dazzling in the sunlight. The apex was crowned with a gold-plated pyramidion. As the sun set, the last rays would illuminate that golden point at the top, as if the god was kissing the pharaoh's house. When Herodotus visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, he wrote in astonishment, each stone block weighed 4,000 pounds. 100,000 men worked for 20 years. The numbers may be exaggerated. Modern estimates suggest 20 to 30,000 workers, but the message is clear. The pyramid was a massive project into which an entire society poured its all power. Millions of blocks extracted from quarries, transported on the Nile, raised by ramps, placed with millimeter precision.
But why? Why were so many resources spent on a dead person? Because the pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was the earthly body of the god Horus. While alive, he was Horus. After death, he became identified with Osiris. And this body had to be protected even after death because the pharaoh's prosperity was Egypt's prosperity. He needed to be powerful in the afterlife as well. The pyramid was the pharaoh's eternal home, his gateway to heaven. The geometry here is no accident. The triangle is one of nature's most stable forms. It distributes pressure evenly, is difficult to topple, impossible to overturn. Still standing thousands of years later, the only wonder of the ancient world that survives today. So why the triangle? Why the pyramid form? Some researchers think it evolved from primitive burial mounds, a simple grave tumulus that grew to monumental proportions over time. Others argue it mimicked sun rays, light beams streaming through clouds turned to stone. The Egyptians called this the Benben stone, the primordial mound of creation, the first piece of land to rise above the waters. In any case, the pyramid pointed upward, and upward was sacred in every tradition. But the real secret was hidden inside. The pyramid's narrow corridors extend at specific angles. In the Great Pyramid, there are two main shafts, one pointing toward the Orion constellation, one toward the North Star. Coincidence? The Egyptians identified Orion with Osiris, god of the dead, lord of rebirth. The pharaoh's soul would travel through these shafts to join his father. The North Star was the unchanging point, a symbol of eternity. Architecture wasn't just aesthetics. Architecture was cosmology itself. And we should pause here to reflect. In the modern world, when we build, we calculate cost, efficiency, comfort, maybe energy savings. The Egyptians calculated the positions of stars, which day the sun would rise where, which corridor led to which god. Architecture and astronomy, religion and mathematics, politics and cosmology, all were an inseparable whole. The pharaoh was powerful because he had a pyramid. The pyramid had to be magnificent because the pharaoh was powerful. Circular logic,
but it worked for thousands of years. And this logic wasn't unique to Egypt. Every great temple was also a display of power. Saying we built this meant we are powerful enough to build this. The temple sent a message both to the god and to neighboring peoples. Power and worship, these two concepts have always been intertwined throughout history. In Greece, the temple took on an entirely different meaning. Building a house for the god remained the fundamental principle, but ideas about what this house should look like were completely different. Consider the Parthenon, atop Athens on the Acropolis, a jewel of marble. Built in the 5th century BCE during Athens' Golden Age, after the Persian Wars as a monument to victory. Commissioned by Pericles, supervised by Phidias, designed by Ictinus and Callicrates. Construction took approximately 15 years. At first glance, it appears symmetrical, flawless, mathematical. Straight lines, evenly spaced columns, geometric precision. But look closer and you'll notice nothing is straight. The columns bulge slightly, thicker in the middle, thinner at the ends. This is called entasis. Why such an error? Because a perfectly straight column appears concave to the human eye. From a distance, the middle seems weakened, warped. The bulge corrects this optical illusion. The column appears straight, but it actually isn't. Is the base level? No, the center is slightly raised, approximately 60 millimeters, barely noticeable. But without this rise, the floor would appear sunken. Are the columns vertical? No. They all lean slightly inward, as if extended they would meet at a point. The corner columns are slightly thicker than the others, because against the sky backdrop, their silhouettes appear thinner. All these errors are intentional. Greek architects developed a system to compensate for the human eye's flaws. Decades of experience, observation, fine-tuning. The goal was for the temple to appear perfect. Not mathematically perfect, but perceptually perfect. And this reflects a profound philosophical stance. In Egypt, what mattered was the god's needs: feeding, clothing, housing. In Greece, what mattered was the beauty offered to the god. Building a house for the god didn't mean abandoning aesthetic pleasure. On the contrary, the most beautiful house offered to the god should be humanity's finest work. What befitted Athena was perfection. There's another difference too. The Greek temple was experienced from the outside, not the inside. Today, we display Greek sculptures indoors in museums, but in that era, ordinary people didn't enter the temple, only priests went inside. The average citizen would approach the temple, climb the steps, but stop at the threshold. They would peer through the great door to see the god's statue. Rituals took place outside, in the open air. The altar front of the temple, where sacrifices were made, where smoke rose to the heavens. Greek religion was public religion. The community gathered together under the sky before the god's house. This is a very different approach from the inward-facing Egyptian temple. In Egypt, the sacred space was dark, secret, inaccessible. In Greece, the sacred was displayed like a marble showcase. For those familiar with the Jerusalem temple structure, this inside-outside distinction will seem very familiar, but the proportions are reversed. According to the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, Solomon's temple was completed around the 10th century BCE, and this temple consisted of 3 sections: Ulam, Hekal, and Dibir. The Ulam was the entrance courtyard, wide, open, accessible to everyone. The Israelites gathered here, celebrated festivals, offered their sacrifices. The Hekal was the main hall. The golden menorah burned here. The incense altar stood here. Only priests could enter. And at the very center, the Dibir, the Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKodashim. Only one person could enter this room only once a year, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, and only on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. With an incense burner in hand, God's secret name on his lips. Inside was a single object, the Ark of the Covenant. Inside it, the tablets of the 10 Commandments. Above it, 2 angel figures, the cherubim. and between the cherubim's wings an invisible presence, God's presence, the Shekhinah. God wasn't in a statue, wasn't in a stone, wasn't a being to be fed or given drink, but still, God had a house.
And here a paradox emerges. If God is everywhere, why does he need a house? Not only the Jews asked this question, every theistic tradition confronted this paradox. If God is limitless, can he fit in a structure? If he's everywhere, what does being in a special place mean? Jewish tradition asked this question for centuries, and the answer was this: the house isn't for God, it's for humans. God can be everywhere, but humans can't comprehend everywhere. Humans are limited, God is infinite. To comprehend the infinite requires a focal point. The temple is where infinity pours into space. Like a lens, sunlight is everywhere, but focused through a lens, it burns. King Solomon, when dedicating the temple, prayed, "The heavens, even the highest heavens, cannot contain you. How much less this house I have built?" He was aware of the paradox, but he built anyway, because human limitation required a point of orientation. This tripartite structure, area open to the public, area open only to the elite, most sacred area, appears in Hindu temples too. Different geographies, different gods, but the spatial organization shows surprising similarities. The innermost chamber of the Hindu temple is called the Garbhagriha, literally womb chamber or embryo chamber, a dark, narrow, simple space, no decoration on the walls, usually no windows, sometimes a chamber barely illuminated even by lamplight. Why so dark, so narrow? Because this is the place of birth, of beginning, of creation, the nucleus of the universe. The god statue, the murti, stands in this dark room, and the person entering the temple progresses step by step from outside to inside, from noise to silence, from light to darkness, from the mundane to the sacred. The outer courtyard is crowded, colorful, noisy. Vendors are there, children are there, the noise of everyday life. Then a door, then a corridor, a bit quieter, a bit darker, then another door, narrower. Now not only the sounds diminish, but thoughts too. And finally, that small room. Breath catches, eyes adjust to the darkness. The only light source is a small oil lamp, flickering, dim, and there, in that light, the god, made of bronze, stone, sometimes gold-plated, but in the darkness, just a silhouette, a sense of presence. This journey isn't accidental. The architecture is designed to create a spiritual experience. Each door is a purification, each threshold a transformation. What you left outside, worries, plans, everyday concerns, stays at the door. The person entering lightens. The person who finally reaches the Garbhagriha is no longer the person who entered. Hindu temple architecture developed sophisticated vocabulary over millennia. The shikara, the tower rising above the sanctuary, mimics the cosmic mountain. In North Indian temples, it curves upward like a beehive. In South Indian temples, it rises in tiers like a stepped pyramid. The gopuram, the monumental gateway, announces the entry into sacred space, covered with thousands of sculpted deities, guardians, celestial beings. Every surface tells a story, every corner has a purpose. The temple is also oriented. The entrance faces east, towards the rising sun. The deity gazes towards dawn, towards renewal, towards beginning. Time itself is built into the structure. And this is a universal theme. In Gothic cathedrals, something similar happens. The transition from outside to inside, from profane to sacred. But in the Hindu temple, this transition is sharper, darker, more radical. In South Asia, two other traditions took the concept of the temple in entirely different directions. Sikhism built the temple to dismantle sacred hierarchies. Jainism miniaturized the sacred in marble. Gurdwara, the Guru's door, is the place of worship in Sikhism. And right at the entrance, a radical difference from other traditions appears. 4 doors: north, south, east, west. 4 entrances from 4 directions. This is not merely architecture, this is a declaration. From every direction, every person is welcome. No caste, no privilege of birth. Let the Brahmin enter, and let the untouchable enter too. Let the rich spread their mat, and let the poor do the same. But the center of the Gurdwara is not the dark chamber where a statue stands. The center is the Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh holy scripture. And this book is regarded as the living Guru. Every morning, it is ceremonially placed upon a golden throne. Cloths are draped over it. A fan is waved above it, as if protecting it from heat. At night, it is taken to sleep. A book, yet treated as a living being. And then there is Langar, the kitchen of the Gurdwara. Every day, in every Gurdwara, free meals for everyone. Millions are fed in Langar, whether Sikh or not, rich or poor, and everyone sits side by side on the same floor, king and peasant in the same row. The meal is the practice of equality. The temple is the place where social revolutions are enacted. Harmandir Sahib in Amritsar, the Golden Temple, represents the pinnacle of this tradition, standing in the middle of an artificial lake covered in gold plating. But it shines not because it excludes grandeur, but because it embraces it. In Rajasthan's Mount Abu, an entirely different world awaits. The Dilwara temples, Jain temples. Plain from the outside, white marble walls, unassuming facades, but when you step inside, your breath is stolen. Marble lace, there is no other way to describe it. In the ceiling domes, on the column capitals, on the wall panels, every square millimeter is carved. Lotus patterns, elephant figures, dancing celestial beings, and no piece resembles another. Hundreds of carvings, each unique. The logic of this craftsmanship is directly connected to Jain philosophy. Ahimsa, non-violence, is the fundamental principle of Jainism. Monks who take care not to harm even an ant. Those who sweep the ground before them as they walk, who cover their mouths with masks, who filter water before drinking. And when these temples were built, the goal was construction without harming any living creature. Stones were quarried from mountains, not rivers, to avoid harming creatures living in water. The principle of minimum damage was applied in the mines, and then each of those marble pieces was carved by hand, patiently over years. The temple is the embodiment of non-violence. In Islam, the concept of the temple took an entirely different form, perhaps the most austere, most refined form among all traditions. The Kaaba is one of the world's simplest yet most powerful places of worship, a cube, roughly 12 meters tall with a base of about 10 by 11 meters, covered in black kiswa cloth with the Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone, at one corner. No decoration, no statue, no image. There are gold inscriptions on the band, but inside it's nearly empty. 3 pillars, a few lamps, carpets, that's all. And every year, millions of Muslims circle this structure. Tawaf, 7 times counterclockwise, as the morning sun rises in the midday heat at midnight by lamplight. Hundreds of thousands of people in white ihram garments all at once around the same center. From above, it resembles a galaxy, a spinning vortex, a black point at its center. According to some Muslim scholars, Tawaf evokes the movement of planets around the sun. It reflects the angels' Tawaf around the divine throne. It suggests electrons orbiting within atoms, a modern metaphor, but interesting.
Mecca is the center of the world for Muslims, just as Delphi was the center for Greeks, Jerusalem for Jews, Cusco for the Incas. Every civilization designated a center and erected a structure at that center. The Kaaba's austerity is a conscious choice. In the Islamic tradition, Allah has no form, He transcends everything, is unlike anything. Making a statue to represent Him would be limiting the limitless. Therefore, the temple doesn't house God's form, it only indicates the direction of His presence. This is an iconoclastic stance, image-breaking. But it's not unique to Islam. In Jewish tradition, too, there's a prohibition against statues, the second commandment. Some Protestant churches also rejected images and statues. In Hindu-Buddhist traditions, statues are common but are seen not as the god itself, but as tools for focus. Each tradition confronted the problem of representation in its own way. Some made statues, some left emptiness, but all asked the same question: how do we show the invisible? This is why the mihrab exists. The mihrab isn't a niche where a statue stands, it's an empty recess. But even this emptiness is a sign, pointing toward the Kaaba. Wherever you are in the world, in prayer, your face turns toward Mecca. This common orientation creates global unity. In Tokyo, in Lagos, in Buenos Aires, in Stockholm, billions of people oriented toward the same point. Other elements of mosque architecture were shaped by this principle too. The dome symbolizes the sky, but not to house gods as in Rome's pantheon, rather to recall the vastness of the heavens. The minaret carries sound. The adhan, the call to prayer, is heard, not seen, auditory rather than visual, sound rather than image. The courtyard provides ample space for the congregation. In Islam, communal prayer is important. Unity and equality are emphasized. Is there decoration? Yes, but in different forms. Geometric patterns, infinitely repeating, never-ending designs, the mathematics of the universe in a single tile. Octagons, 12-pointed stars, interlocking circles. Each evokes infinity. Where it begins, where it ends, unclear. Calligraphy, the dance of words, the grace of Allah's names. Quranic verses on walls, on dome skirts, on mihrab arches. Writing carries both meaning and aesthetic beauty. Muqarnas, honeycomb shapes under domes, geometric light plays. Hundreds of small niches interconnected, giving a sense of infinite depth. No human figure, no concrete representation, but the most complex abstract beauty humans can create. You cannot represent the infinite with a finite form, but you can create patterns that evoke infinity. Consider the great mosques that exemplify these principles. The Blue Mosque in Istanbul, with its cascade of domes and 6 minarets. The Mosque of Cordoba, with its forest of horseshoe arches, red and white stripes repeating into apparent infinity. The Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi, with its 82 domes and over 1,000 columns. Isfahan's Masjid-i-Shah, with its turquoise tiles that seem to contain the sky itself.
Each follows the same fundamental logic. No images, but overwhelming beauty. No gods to see, but presence to feel. Simplicity of concept, complexity of execution. The Buddhist stupa tells an entirely different story, and it's perhaps the structure that most stretches the boundaries of the word temple. You don't enter a stupa, there's no god statue inside. In Buddhism, the concept of a creator god is different anyway. There's no altar for worship, so what is this structure? A map of the universe. The first stupas began simply. After the Buddha's death in the 6th or 5th century BCE, his body was cremated and the ashes were divided among 8 kingdoms. Each kingdom buried its portion and erected a mound above it, a simple pile of earth, perhaps covered with stone. Over time, these simple mounds evolved. Each section gained symbolic meaning. The stupa has 4 main components. At the base, a square platform, the Medi or Harmika. It represents the earth, symbolizes the 4 directions.
Above it, a hemispherical dome called the Anda or Garba, representing the sky, the cosmic egg, wholeness. At the top, a small square platform with disc-shaped layers called yasti, stacked like umbrellas, usually 3 or 7. They symbolize the stages of enlightenment, the celestial realms. And at the very top, a spire-like point, the finial. It indicates reaching nirvana, going beyond form. To look at a Buddhist stupa is to look at the universe. And the stupa isn't just a structure to look at, it's a structure to walk around. Pradakshina, clockwise, in meditation, sometimes hundreds of times. Buddhist pilgrims circle stupas, reciting mantras with each step. Walking is meditation itself. Circling is experiencing change within repetition. Ruwanwelisaya in Sri Lanka, Bodhanath in Nepal, Borobudur in Indonesia, all shaped by this principle. Borobudur deserves special mention. Built in the 9th century on the island of Java, this massive structure is actually a 3-dimensional mandala. Its base is square, its top circular. 9 platforms, over 500 Buddha statues, and 2,600 relief panels. Each level represents a different level of consciousness. At the bottom, Kamadhatu, the realm of desire. Everyday passions, greed, hatred are depicted here. The reliefs show the law of karma. Bad actions produce bad results. In the middle, Rupadhatu, the realm of form. Buddha's life, his previous lives, his teachings. Geometry still exists, but desire has diminished. At the top, Arupadhatu, the realm of formlessness. Here, there are no reliefs, only bell-shaped stupas with Buddha statues inside in meditation posture. And at the very center, an empty stupa, nothing inside. Because nirvana is emptiness. It is beyond form. The visitor starts from the lowest platform, ascends on a spiral path, at each turn encountering different reliefs, different teachings, finally reaching the top. Silence. This is an architectural meditation, a teach-in in stone. You read as you walk, you transform as you read. What about the dome? Perhaps the most universal symbol of temple architecture. Look up. The sky appears like a dome. Stars at fixed points, the sun and moon tracing specific arcs. Ancient people imagined the sky as a curved ceiling and brought that ceiling into their temples. Rome's Pantheon is an engineering marvel that has stood for approximately 2,000 years. Built in the 2nd century CE during Emperor Hadrian's reign. Its dome is cast concrete, and it remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. 43 meters in diameter, 43 meters in height, a perfect sphere fits inside the structure. But the real magic is in the hole at the top, the oculus. A 9-meter diameter opening looking directly at the sky. No glass in front, no cover, open. What happens when it rains? Water comes in. But the floor slopes slightly from center to edges, with small drainage holes arranged in a grid. Water flows away, no pooling occurs. The sky enters the temple, then returns to earth. As the sun moves, a beam of light rotates inside the structure. At noon, it hits the floor. In the morning, the wall. At the spring equinox, the sun enters directly through the door. The sky moves inside the temple. The dome is the sky itself. The Pantheon was dedicated to all gods, Pan-Theos, all gods. And the dome took in the entire sky. Every god was there because the entire sky was there. Every point of the dome equidistant from the center, a democratic sky, no god ahead of another. After Rome's fall, this structure stood for centuries. Later, Christians converted it to a church, Santa Maria ad Martyris, Saint Mary of the Martyrs. And that hole opening to the sky became Heaven's Gate. A pagan temple had become a Christian place of worship, but the architecture hadn't changed, only the meaning had. This tells us something interesting. Architectural forms can live independently of their meanings. The same dome can serve different gods. The Hagia Sophia took the same idea to another dimension. Built in the 6th century at Emperor Justinian's command, this was the largest church of its era, and it used the dome in an unprecedented way. At the dome's base are 40 windows side by side, as if almost lifting the dome off its base. Not holes, but almost holes, light streaming in as lines. The light entering makes the dome appear suspended in mid-air, as if not touching the walls, floating above them. Light enters from different angles depending on the time of day. The space constantly changes. When the historian Procopius saw this, he wrote, "The dome seems suspended from heaven by a golden chain." From an engineering perspective, this is an illusion. The dome is heavy, resting on 4 massive piers and semidomes. Throughout its history, the structure has been damaged by earthquakes, repaired, buttresses added. But the aim remained the same: to create a space that doesn't crush, but elevates. Not heaven descending to earth, but earth rising to heaven.
And this structure too changed meanings. It began as a Byzantine church, was converted to a mosque after the Ottoman conquest, became a museum during the Republic period, and is now a mosque again. 4 different eras, 4 different meanings, but still the same dome, still the same play of light. Gothic cathedrals achieved the same goal of elevation through different means. Pointed arches, flying buttresses, massive stained glass windows. Rising across Europe from the 12th century onward, these structures nearly eliminated the heavy walls of Romanesque architecture. The problem was this: if there's a wall, light can't enter. If there's no wall, the structure collapses. But if the load-bearing system changes, then the wall can become transparent. The flying buttress transferred the load that the wall had to carry to the outside. The pointed arch reduced horizontal force, and thus walls could be thinned, even covered with glass. Chartres Cathedral has 173 stained glass windows. Notre Dame's rose window is 13 meters in diameter. In Cologne, the choir section is almost entirely glass. And these weren't ordinary glass. Cobalt blue, ruby red, emerald green, colored with metallic oxides. Sacred scenes, saints' lives, Bible stories. A visual Bible for illiterate congregations, written in stone and light. As daylight changed, so did the colors inside. In the morning, the eastern windows would glow. In the evening, the western. Throughout the year, as the sun's angle changed, the temple told different stories. A dynamic space, not a static structure. Chartres, Notre Dame, Cologne, Milan, Reims, all with the same logic. Everything pointed upward. Pointed arches reaching toward heaven, colored light filtering through stained glass, bringing heaven to earth. Columns rising like forests, drums climbing hundreds of meters. The person entering can't help but look up, even if their neck aches. And there's an emotional dimension here too. What would a medieval person feel entering these cathedrals? Imagine you live in a small village, in a low-ceilinged cottage, by candlelight. Then one day you go to the city and enter this structure, massive, filled with light, colorful, resonating with music. This shock effect still partly applies to tourists today. It must have been far more powerful in that era. Architecture had again become a tool, but this time the aim wasn't representation, it was direction. To pull you upward, to lift your eyes to heaven, to elevate your soul. And perhaps to make you feel your smallness, to show how small you are before God's greatness. There's acoustics too. These cathedrals were designed for sound. The long nave, the high ceilings, the hard stone surfaces all create extraordinary reverberation. Gregorian chants would echo for seconds, notes blending into chords, human voices transformed into something otherworldly. The architecture sang, or rather, it made human singing sound divine. And smell. Incense rising through these vast spaces, mixing with the moisture of stone, the earthiness of centuries. The sensory experience was total, visual, auditory, olfactory, every faculty enlisted in the service of transcendence.
This is why restoration work on cathedrals is so painstaking. When Notre Dame burned in 2019, the world watched in horror, not just because of historical value, but because these structures carry meaning that transcends their materials. They embody centuries of devotion, skill, and aspiration. To lose them is to lose something irreplaceable about human civilization. In Japan, the temple answered an entirely different question. How is permanence achieved? The Ise Shrine is Shinto's holiest site, dedicated to Amaterasu, the sun goddess, ancestor of the imperial family. It could be called Japan's spiritual center. For centuries, emperors came here before ascending to the throne. But what makes it special isn't its structure or size. It's a ritual. Every 20 years, it's demolished and rebuilt.
Shikinen Sengu, the periodic renewal ceremony. Every 20 years, the entire temple complex, over 60 structures, is rebuilt with the same techniques, the same materials, the same craftsmanship. Thousands of workers, years of preparation, and the new one is erected on the empty plot right next to the old one. There are two plots. Every 20 years, one is empty, one is full. When the old temple is dismantled, its materials, Shikinen Sengu, the periodic renewal ceremony. Every 20 years, the entire temple complex, over 60 structures, is rebuilt with the same techniques, the same materials, the same craftsmanship. Thousands of workers, years of preparation, and the new one is erected on the empty plot right next to the old one. There are two plots. Every 20 years, one is empty, one is full. When the old temple is dismantled, its materials aren't burned. They're sent to other shrines throughout Japan and used in those structures. Sacred wood continues to live in various forms. Nothing is lost. It transforms. The buildings are made of hinoki, Japanese cypress columns with thatched roofs, simple design. No paint, no lacquer, just natural wood. No nails are used, mortise and tenon joinery. Every piece can be removed and reassembled. This is both a technical choice and a philosophical stance, organic harmony rather than mechanical connection. The tradition has been repeated for approximately 1,300 years. The first recorded renewal was in 690 CE. The 62nd renewal was completed in 2013. Why? Why wait 20 years and then build an entirely new building? 20 years is a generation. Masters train apprentices. Apprentices learn, then become masters themselves. Knowledge is transmitted between generations, not on stone tablets, but through hands. There are several answers. The practical answer: wood decays. In Japan's humid climate, 20 years is a reasonable lifespan for a wooden structure, but they could have used stone to avoid such expensive renewals. They didn't. The symbolic answer: in Shinto, purity, cleanliness, freshness is a central value. Old is impure, new is pure. Every 20 years, the temple is purified. The deeper answer: permanence is achieved not through the object's survival, but through the process's continuation. Stone erodes, marble cracks, concrete crumbles. Look at the Parthenon. They chose stone for permanence. Now it's a ruin. The pyramid lost its outer casing, its capstone. No material lasts forever. But repeated renewal, this can last forever. The temple stays the same because it's constantly renewed. The essence doesn't change, but the body does. This is the opposite of the Western preservation approach. We freeze ancient structures, treat them with chemicals, support them with steel frames. We pretend time has stopped. The Ise Shrine accepts time and transcends it. Which is more permanent? Perhaps the answer to this question concerns philosophy more than architecture. What remains unchanged within change? What makes something the same? Its atoms, its form, its meaning? In Central America, pyramids emerged completely independently of Egypt, thousands of kilometers apart, thousands of years apart,
two civilizations unaware of each other arrived at nearly the same form. Is this coincidence or the inevitability of geometry? Think about it. You want to make a hill, but with stones. A sharp cone is too unstable, it would collapse. A flat platform is too low, not grand enough. What's the most stable form? Wide base, narrowing top, even slope, the pyramid. Perhaps the pyramid is the mathematical result of gravity itself. Every civilization is subject to the same laws of physics, and the same laws inevitably lead to similar forms. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is one of the world's largest pyramids. Its base is approximately 220 meters, nearly as large as Khufu's. 65 meters tall, built in the 1st or 2nd century CE. But its function was different from Egyptian pyramids.
Egyptian pyramids were tombs, the dead pharaoh's eternal home, not to be entered, sealed, secret. Mesoamerican pyramids were living temples. They had altars at their summits. Rituals were performed. Sacrifices were made. The people gathered below. Priests met with gods above. This difference is critical. In Egypt, the pyramid served death. In Mesoamerica, it served life, for the sun to continue rising, for rain to fall, for corn to grow. Maya and Aztec pyramids rose in stepped tiers. Priests climbed these steps, making offerings to the gods at the summit. Thousands gathered below, watching what happened above. Like theater, but what was watched was a divine drama, and the spectators were part of the play. Consider El Castillo. This pyramid at Chichen Itza is dedicated to Kukulkan, the feathered serpent. Each face has 91 steps, plus the platform at top, a total of 365. The number of days in the Maya calendar. The structure itself is a calendar. And at the spring equinox, twice a year, a miracle occurs. As the sun sets, shadows begin to form on the pyramid's northern steps. The boundary between light and shadow slides downward in triangular shapes, zigzagging like a serpent's coils. And this shadow serpent connects to the stone serpent head sculpture at the base of the stairs. Kukulkan descends from the sky. The pyramid comes to life. Every year, thousands of tourists travel there to witness this moment. But 1,000 years ago, for the Maya people standing there, this wasn't just a tourist spectacle. It was proof of cosmic order. The gods were keeping their promise. Spring would come. Planting could begin. This isn't coincidence. Every stone, every angle, every step was calculated. The Maya were star observers, mathematicians, engineers. They had discovered the concept of zero long before Europe. They had calculated Venus's cycle to the day. Their pyramids worked like clocks synchronized with the sky. Angkor Wat shows the same precision, but this time in Southeast Asia, in the Hindu-Buddhist tradition. Built in the 12th century by King Suryavarman II at the height of the Khmer Empire, this is the world's largest religious complex, an area exceeding 400 hectares, the size of a city. Thousands of workers, decades of construction, and all of it shaped around a single idea, the representation of Mount Meru. In Hindu cosmology, Meru is the sacred mountain at the center of the universe. 7 seas and 7 continents revolve around Meru. Gods sit at its summit: Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Its roots descend into the underworld. Its peak touches the heavens. Angkor Wat is a stone model of this cosmic mountain. Its 5 towers symbolize Meru's 5 peaks. The central tower is the tallest, approximately 65 meters. The wide moats surrounding it represent the cosmic ocean. 3-tiered galleries show 3 cosmic realms: underworld, earth, sky. The approach is significant too. You enter from the west, unusual for Hindu temples, which typically face east. This Western orientation suggests a connection with death and the afterlife. Some scholars believe Angkor Wat was also a funerary temple for its builder. You cross a causeway over the moat, symbolically crossing the cosmic ocean. You pass through gates, through galleries, through increasingly sacred spaces. The journey is spiritual, progressive, transformative.
wall reliefs tell Hindu epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata. Approximately 2 kilometers of continuous relief, the world's longest relief wall. Gods and demons, wars and loves, creation and destruction, all carved in stone. The churning of the ocean of milk, the creation myth, unfolds across an entire gallery wall. Vishnu himself appears multiple times. His avatars populate the panels. History and mythology interweave. And positioned according to the sun's movement. At the spring equinox, the sun rises directly behind the central tower, as if rising from the tower, as if rising from Meru. Kingdom and cosmos, architecture and astrology all unite. The temple becomes the universe itself, and the king sits at the center of that universe. And here we arrive at the common idea behind 10,000 years of construction. Mircea Eliade called it imago mundi, the image of the world. Every temple is a miniature copy of the universe. The ziggurat reaches toward heaven because heaven is above and gods live there. The pyramid points to the stars because the soul returns to the stars after death. The dome imitates the sky because God is transcendent, beyond the heavens. The stupa draws a map of the cosmos because to worship is to understand the universe. The cube of the Kaaba in its simplicity marks the center because determining direction is finding order within chaos. Different materials, different styles, different gods, but the same impulse. Where does this impulse come from? Perhaps from this. If God is limitless, if God is everywhere, then paradoxically God is nowhere. Cannot be seen with eyes, cannot be touched with hands. Thought cannot comprehend God. Language cannot describe God. But humans think concretely. We understand abstraction only through the concrete. When we say love, we draw a heart, justice, a stele, God, a place, a structure, a house. And the human mind cannot comprehend infinity. A point is needed, a center, an address. Even nomadic communities sought a center. The tent pole, axis mundi, the world axis. That pole, a symbolic line reaching toward heaven. In the Mongolian yurt, the smoke hole is a window opening to the sky. In the Native American teepee, the central pole is the universe's spine. For Australian Aborigines, a sacred rock. For Polynesians, a sacred tree. Settled societies made that pole from stone, enlarged it, decorated it. The temple is the monumental version of the nomad's tent pole. And this center isn't just spatial, it's temporal too. The temple organizes time. Festivals, rituals, worship hours, all tied to the temple. In Egypt, the god's statue was fed 3 times daily, morning, noon, and evening. In the Jewish temple, daily sacrifices were timed to the sun's movement. Muslim call to prayer divides the cycle from dawn to dusk. In Christian monasteries, bells ring every 3 hours. The hours, time. Weekly, monthly, yearly cycles all unite in the temple calendar. The temple creates order within chaos. It centers space, divides time, gathers community.
Giving infinity an address. Drawing a frame to comprehend the incomprehensible, placing somewhere whatever is feared, respected, loved, whatever it may be. Humans do this, have been doing it for 10,000 years, and are still doing it. Today's skyscrapers, new museums, stadiums being built, aren't these also a kind of temple? To the god of money, the god of art, the god of sports. I'm half joking, but half serious. Look at the size, look at the details, look at the resources spent. Wherever you pour resources, that's where your priority lies. Wall Street's columns are inspired by classical Greek temples, banks were deliberately designed to look like temples, to inspire trust, to command respect. The Lincoln Memorial in Washington is literally a Greek temple. The Lincoln statue inside mimics the pose of the Zeus statue. And look at stadiums, arenas for 100,000 people, fireworks displays, collective hymns. Fans kneel, cry, wave flags. How different is this from temple rituals? What about airports, the new cathedrals of mobility? Vast interior spaces, soaring ceilings, natural light filtering through glass walls. You enter, you pass through security checkpoints like ritual purification zones and emerge into the terminal, a world unto itself. Time flows differently there. You're between places, between identities, suspended. And the architecture reflects this liminality. These are threshold spaces, transition zones. Or consider concert halls, the Sydney Opera House with its shell-like sails, the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles with its billowing metal curves, places designed for transcendent experience through sound. You enter, you sit in darkness, music fills the space, and for a moment you're lifted out of everyday consciousness. The architecture facilitates transformation. Whatever people value, they build big buildings there. Architecture is the expression of priority. And when priorities change across eras, architecture changes too. In the Middle Ages, the largest structures were cathedrals. During the Industrial Revolution, factories and train stations rose. In the 20th century, skyscrapers, corporate temples. In the 21st century, perhaps data centers. Silent, cooled, inaccessible, but containing all of humanity's knowledge. Perhaps every age has its own temple, and by looking at that temple, you can read that age's gods, its values. Tonight, we toured structures of stone, wood, gold, and concrete. We walked through Egypt's dim corridors, descended into darkness like priests, gazed upon the god statue. We climbed Mesopotamia's ziggurats, reached the summit breathless, saw the horizon. We felt the coolness of Greek marble, noticed the columns bulge, appreciated the optical perfection. We peered into Jerusalem's darkest room, but couldn't enter anymore. No one can enter anymore. We circled the Kaaba, together with the white crowd, a black point at the center. We ascended Borobudur's steps, different teachings on each level, silence at the top. We looked at the sky through the Pantheon's oculus, watched the play of light in Hagia Sophia's dome. We saw Issei's wooden simplicity, eternity renewed every 20 years. We waited for the serpent's shadow on El Castillo's steps, crossed the cosmic ocean in Angkor Wat's moats. Every structure different, but something common to all, humanity's effort to say something about the universe. And perhaps the most important temple is one that was never built. The scriptures tell it. King David wanted to build a temple. He planned for years, gathered materials, acquired the land, but he received a divine message. You are a warrior. There is blood on your hands. Your son will build this house. And his son Solomon built it, magnificent, splendid, covered in gold. According to scripture, construction took 7 years. Cedars of Lebanon, gold from Ophir, Hiram's craftsmen. On the day of dedication, God's presence filled the temple like a cloud the priests couldn't stand. But centuries later, the Babylonians burned and destroyed it. 586 BCE, the exile began. Then it was rebuilt, the second temple, but it wasn't as magnificent as the first. The Ark of the Covenant was lost. It was expanded during Herod's time, becoming a massive complex. Then the Romans destroyed it again, 70 CE. Only one wall remained, the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, Hakotel. A remnant of stone, not the temple itself, but part of the wall surrounding its courtyard. But every day, thousands of people stand before those stones. They pray. They weep. They press their foreheads against the stone. They slip small papers into the cracks between stones. Wishes, prayers, confessions. As if the temple were still there. As if that invisible presence were still somewhere among them.
And perhaps it is. Perhaps the true temple isn't made of stones. Perhaps the true temple was what was in the mind of that first human who lifted a stone and placed it on another. Intention, purpose, orientation. That fire within, the desire to make the invisible visible, to give the invisible a home, to place the infinite somewhere, to draw a frame for comprehending the incomprehensible. For 10,000 years, humans have been doing the same thing, with different materials, to different gods, in different forms, with mud brick, granite, marble, concrete, to Zeus, to Amun, to Ahura Mazda, to Allah, to Buddha, to Kami, with ziggurats, pyramids, domes, stupas, but always the same movement, lifting one stone and placing it on another. And structures collapse through earthquakes, wars, neglect, time, through fire, invasions, nature's patient reclamation. But on the ruins, new ones are built. When one collapses, someone else places another stone. That impulse doesn't collapse. Perhaps as long as the world exists, humans will continue building temples. Perhaps if we go to Mars, we'll build them there too, on red soil under a red sky. Perhaps we're already building virtual temples in digital worlds, VR cathedrals, metaverse mosques, crypto shrines, without realizing it. And there's something comforting in this continuity. Across all our divisions, religious, cultural, political, we share this fundamental urge. Different gods, different techniques, different materials, but the same question, the same lifting of one stone onto another, the same hope that what is built might capture something beyond building, the same faith that the invisible might consent to dwell among us. 10,000 years of construction, 10,000 years of reaching upward, and still we build. Still we raise our structures toward whatever we consider sacred. Still we hope that our houses, however imperfect, however limited, might somehow be worthy of what they're meant to contain. Because the question doesn't change. Where does God live, and what kind of house should we build for God? The answers change. Every age, every culture, every civilization gives its own answer, but the question remains. I'm Night Archivist. Keep your minds open.